At Manhattan University, a graduate degree is not out of reach. You'll gain real-world skills, credentials employers value, and connections to New York City's top companies. Choose from their new Master of Science degrees in Healthcare Informatics, Digital Marketing and Analytics, Business Analytics, or Financial Analytics, all built around hands-on learning and industry partnerships. Graduate ready to lead, not just work. Take the next step at manhattan.edu/graduate. Manhattan University. Lead the future.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast. The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're talking stocks with truly two of the best investors I've known down through the years, Stephanie Link, now Hightower Advisors and Investment Solutions, and Nancy Tengler of Laffer Tengler Investments. In her book, The Women's Guide to Successful Investing, we bring in my dear friend, the great Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media. Steve's latest book is Inflation, What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It. Steve, thank you for doing this. You're going to stay over from any politics, too, if you can.
Yes.
Our two ladies are relatively optimistic about the longer-term view in the market. I just wonder what you're thinking.
Well, I think we're trying to trade the market in these kinds of orders would be ridiculous, and you just have to see things through, even though there's going to be probably a lot more volatilities. You know, Larry, wars always throw up unexpected things, both good and bad. So just stay through with it. And one of the things we should be looking at, too, in terms of that seemingly bad jobs report, is we've got a seasonal adjustment problem. As you know, in December, we got hundreds of thousands, perhaps a couple of million people coming temporarily into the job force for the holidays. In January, most of them leave the labor force. So they try to seasonally adjust for that, these massive numbers. And that's why December, January numbers I take with a huge grain of salt the size of Mount Everest. And when you have the uncertainty about tariffs, when you have the terrible weather, you have a nurses' strike in New York, which affected healthcare workers, I just shunt that all aside. I want to wait a couple of months till we finally get a real take on things and to see how the Kevin Warsh hearings go in Congress, because the Federal Reserve, what I worry about with the Fed is that if we have a sustained spike in oil prices with their Phillips curve prosperity cause inflation mentality, they may do something dumb instead of reducing short-term rates, which they should have done a long time ago.
Well, on that point, I had Mickey Bowman on the show last night, vice chair of the Fed for Supervision, an old friend of mine, very smart woman. She wants to cut rates, Steve. In fact, she wants to do several things. She agrees with Kevin Warsh about shrinking the balance sheet and reducing the Fed's assets. She wants to have lower interest rates. She believes the banks are over-capitalized, okay?
Yes.
And she wants to see them make more C&I loans to, medium and small businesses. I mean, she has a very good pro-growth agenda. We talked about how stupid the Fed is, 1.7% growth. Forever and ever, and she agreed. She basically said, "I'm a supply sider." I mean, it was really quite an informative interview. I just turned the switch on, and she went, "Go," and she did. It was terrific.
Well, that's good long run when we get over these current crises, because the Federal Reserve needs a fundamental overhaul and have at least several governors understand the profound flaws of the Fed in terms of their modeling. You're going to get institutional resistance, but if you have the Treasury Department, which you do, and the White House, which you do, and you have several people on the board itself who understand how malfunctioning the Fed has been in terms of their modeling for a number of years, that can begin to fundamentally change the way the Federal Reserve sees the world, because they've been a destructive force. That size of the balance sheet, by the way, they'll never research it honestly, has had a bad impact on lending to small businesses and the like, distorted the capital markets. And in terms of her point about the banks lending again, imagine banks hiring more lending officers instead of compliance officers. We need that.
Stephanie Link, what do you think of all that? That was quite a mouthful. He's a smart guy, Steph.
He certainly is, and I'm glad that he's very constructive on long term on the equity market. And honestly, I mean, the Fed is going to be an interesting watch, right? Because they're kind of a little bit in a bind in terms of what do they do. He's got to corral all the people, right? And I just hope that he can. And I think Steve's right in terms of I think they should have been lowering rates for a long time. And now with the labor market kind of a little soft, they can, I think, and I think that they should.
You know, Nancy, I will say this. This goes to Steve's point about flawed seasonal adjustment. I don't believe any of these numbers. Because of the shutdown, I mean, and I'm a numbers guy, okay, or I used to be. I just don't believe any of it, honestly. I see them, and I just say, yeah, what else is new?
Well, and they're so subject to massive revision as we've seen over the last couple of years, and so it always surprises me when the market trades off the today number because we know it's going to be revised. But if you look deeper in the ISM manufacturing and ISM services, you see that people are hiring, and the employment numbers went up. So that's to me is much more instructive real-time data, real data, instead of all the estimations and seasonal adjustments. And Kevin Hassett said on All Airs on Friday that, it's the birth-death model. And so it's been revised again, but we treat this like it's the gospel when the numbers come out. And so I just think, again, it just creates opportunities for long-term investors because the employment picture is pretty solid. I mean, we had 5.8% unemployment during the 90s. And stock prices, the economy grew, stock prices rose, generationally high levels. So I just think you have to step away from the numbers, look at the trend lines, but look at the real data. And to me, is the ISM numbers.
Look at the 4-week moving average of weekly jobless claims.
Right.
That is what you pay attention to because it's more real time. Yep. And you're at 215,000 over the last 4 weeks. These are historically low numbers. Recession is 350 to 375,000. Yep. We are way away from that.
So we're talking money and politics, or we're going to some interesting stuff out there on oil and wealth creation and reinsurance. All very interesting. We're staying with our pal Steve Forbes. The great Forbes is chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media. We have, I think, Liz Peek, Fox News contributor and weekly columnist, and my buddy Steve Moore, Unleashed Prosperity Hotline, and WABC radio host of More Money, which comes right up after this show on most of these same radio stations. I think we're all here. Steve Moore, in the middle of this war, there's a couple things. The hotline, the Prosperity Hotline, is knocking out some great stuff, and I want to refer to it because point number one, the rise in oil prices has more to do with Lloyd's of London pulling back, ending all their contracts for insurance, than it does about a shortage of supply, okay? And your points here, we're record high 13.6 million barrels per day. We are 24, this is my favorite, we're 24 million barrels per day in oils and liquid fuels, more than Russia and Saudi Arabia combined. And then finally, we're doing 110 billion cubic feet per day for natural gas, which is just about the same as Russia, Iran, and communist China combined. In other words, we don't have a supply problem at all. In fact, I would just add to this, we are a net exporter now of oil and fossil fuels. So you got, okay, you can clear up the reinsurance issue, which we'll probably do with this government agency, the DFC, and stabilize. But that will get us through the Straits of Hormuz, and that's going to bring oil price down. But America is, drill baby drill was pure genius, Steve. Going back to 2015, he knew all about this.
Yep, thank God. And imagine, if we had not elected Donald Trump and we had the left's war on fossil fuels, we'd be paying $150 a barrel for oil today.
Right.
And so all those figures you just recited are true. And by the way, something that Trump did that I bet a lot of your listeners don't know is that inside the Energy Department. My good friend Chris Wright, I don't know if you've gotten to get to know him, but he's absolutely fantastic. He's the new Energy Department cabinet officer, and they've created an Office of Energy Dominance. An Office of Energy Dominance, and it's a multi-agency. It has the Interior Department, Defense Department, and others, and of course the Energy Department is all about how do we produce as much energy as we can, and that's basically, I think the energy of the future is oil, natural gas, nuclear power, and clean coal, and we got a lot of that.
Yep. So I'm reading this article by distinguished columnist named Liz Peek. Here's the title: Trump has been right about oil all along. Really, Liz?
Well, you got to think back to Jimmy Carter telling Americans that we were running out of oil. And of course, that was the mindset amongst people who really hated the oil industry. But it really was very formative in terms of spurring on the great climate obsession that took hold of Europe. I mean, nothing irritates me more than looking at Europe and how they became so dependent on Russia for natural gas, and then also continue to be very dependent on everybody in the world, including the Strait of Hormuz, for oil. I mean, it's really kind of ridiculous, right? For example, the United Kingdom allowing their North Sea oil fields to deplete. Right. Yes, of course, production has headed down, but guess what? It's not down in Norway. They continue to invest. And do you know the conservative government put on I think it was a 78% windfall profits tax when oil and gas prices went up when the Ukraine war started. And so there's been absolutely zero investment.
Wait, in England. The Tories put on a 78% tax? Oh, God, I love that.
That's right.
I love that.
And, by the way, it was meant to be temporary, and there has never been a tax in the history of the world that was temporary, so it's still in place. And then the Labor Department banned oil and gas development. So, I mean, to the extent that they're struggling, their economies are struggling, and they don't have self-sufficiency like the U.S., et cetera, they deserve it. They have this coming. They for decades now, they have basically made it impossible to access oil and gas from reasonable sources, dependable sources, geopolitically safe sources, and it's come home to roost.
Steve Forbes, geopolitically, we've been held hostage by Iran in the Strait of Hormuz, by Venezuela, perhaps to a lesser extent, but still, two big bad actors. That's all going to change now, isn't it?
It is already beginning to change, and it's going to take a while for it to sink in around the world. One of the amazing things is, in terms of Iran, the fact that they're still fighting today, even though it's much depleted, shows how much rearmament they've been doing, arming they've been doing for the last 30 years. And and that wasn't just to defend Iran. They were planning to take over the whole Middle East. Mm-hmm. And the fact they're lobbing bombs on their neighbors shows what their true imperial intentions were. And they never really made it a secret. They wanted the Iranian to be the empire of the Middle East, and indeed, it crazily sounds, the world. So the stopping them and cleaning them out thoroughly, as you've been discussing on this show, is absolutely essential. But one of the things, though, we must not overlook is Ukraine, and we must not shortchange them in terms of armaments because of the war in the Middle East. Putin still remains a threat, and if he starts to lose ground in Ukraine, doesn't have to lose much, I think you're going to see a real change there. And with China, hopefully with the meeting coming up next month, the first of several with Xi Jinping, that we make clear we've made with the Strait of Hormuz is international waters, and the South China Sea is international waters, and we're going to send naval forces to make sure you don't get any ideas you're going to make this your private lake.
That's such an interesting point, important point. On the TV show the other night, Robert O'Brien, former National Security Advisor, said, once this Iranian thing's over, and it's going to be over in a couple of weeks, whatever, we can move all kinds of troops, Navy carriers, other resources, Air Force, away from all these. We have so many bases in the Middle East. We can move that into the Indo-Pacific area, which will be a signal to China that, their merrymaking is going to have a high price. And really, when they look at our mighty might in the military in Iran, that's another deterrent to China. And we're pushing them out of the Western Hemisphere, or at least we're pushing them out of South America. China's a net loser in the Middle East. China's a net loser in the Western Hemisphere. And China's going to be a net loser in the Indo-Pacific. Steve, we got this very strong woman in Japan who's very pro-Trump, very pro-America, and she doesn't like China one bit.
No, and the fact that she called a snap election and won it because of the way the Chinese are trying to bully her around and trying to have the Japanese community, where they have a lot of trade with China, as does the other Asian countries, to pressure her to step down or reduce her rhetoric and her pro-defense policies. She beat them back. And by the way, one of the things we need to do is send you and perhaps Art Laffer and Steve to Japan to educate her on supply-side economics. They still believe in spending. They still have these crazy monetary policies. So we got to get them on the right track, and then she'll have the economic strength to be an effective counter to the bullying by China.
I'm going to send Liz Peek. I mean, woman to woman. Liz Peek can change it. No, you're right. I mean, she wants growth, but they always do it the wrong way. It's Keynesian top-down spending, and they don't reform the tax code ever.
One quick thing on that, Larry. In our country, our FICA tax, payroll tax is 15.3%. Half employer employee. Mm-hmm. In Japan, it's over 30%, 31 to 32%, and no limit, no cap as we have in this country. No wonder they're in the doldrums.
Jeez.
So, Steve Moore, you must have been pretty happy, though. The New York Trade Court says you got to pay back the tariff revenues that the Supreme Court ruled out. Mm-hmm. You must be a really happy camper.
Well, listen, I mean, I think that the
$135 billion.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
This is the court even said when they made their decision that this is going to be a mess, and that was one of the truest statements they've ever made. It is a mess. It looks to me, I'm not a lawyer, but it's pretty clear from the law that now that these tariffs have been deemed unconstitutional, the money has to be repaid, and then the question of to whom. And probably what's going to happen is the money is going to go back to Walmart and Costco and the retailers and so on. But the big question then, Larry, is what about consumers? Because consumers did pay some of the cost of these. And so I don't know how to untangle that knot, but it's going to be, I think you're going to see a lot of lawsuits coming up in the months ahead.
Yeah, they can, look, the Customs Bureau, they're good. They have all the information.
The receipts, yeah. They know who paid the tax.
And then the Treasury Department is something called the Bureau of Fiscal Services. They can get the money out. But your last point is important. I don't see how consumers get the money. I just don't.
Well, let me just say one thing about that. Can I just say one quick thing? I think the big box stores and the super, the huge retailers like the Walmarts, they would be smart, I think, to provide rebates or,
cut prices,
sales or something like that.
Cut prices.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I think cutting prices would be smart for them on several fronts. Yeah. It would show the world that they would have had lower prices all along, but for the tariffs. In other words, it'd be a very strong political argument against tariffs, which they don't like, particularly a company like Walmart. And right now, it would also endear them to the administration. So, I mean, it'd be sort of an odd political 1-2, but I think it'd be very effective.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Let's take a break. Okay, we're going to come back. There's some other interesting stuff from the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, and I want to talk about the long run economy, because I think we are going to defeat Iran. We are going to destroy the regime. Something good is going to come out of this, and there's going to be a lot of prosperity in the Middle East and elsewhere because of what President Trump is doing. We're talking to Steve Forbes, Chairman and Editor-in-Chief of Forbes Media. Steve Moore, who's got more money coming up at WABC right after the show and most of these same radio stations. Liz Peek, Fox News contributor. Steve Moore, just want to pick up one thing. I really love this thing from the hotline. Unleash Prosperity Hotline. Since 1989, okay, it's a long time, everybody has gotten wealthier in this country. And you have the great chart here, but I'll just walk through it quickly. The top 1%, yep, they're the leaders, over 800% increase for the top. But the next 9%, about 600 increase. Then you go into the middle class, roughly 40% of the people, they have nearly a 600% increase in their wealth. And then here's the one I like the best. The bottom 50% since 1989 have increased their wealth by a little over 400%. So a rising tide is lifting all boats. And that's the way free market enterprise, free market capitalism, free enterprise should work, Steve Moore. It's a very important chart. Is he not there? That's a pity.
Sorry. The irony of that chart, by the way, Larry, is that that was a part of a Wall Street Journal article talking about the inequality in wealth. You buried the lead here. I mean, everybody's doing better. And so, just to be clear, though, those numbers are not adjusted for inflation. But even adjusting for inflation, you're seeing enormous gains in wealth over the last 35 years. This was, as I always say, this is basically the economy that's been bookended by Reagan and Trump.
Right.
And so these are amazing numbers with respect to wealth, and every income group got richer, and the left to go, oh, well, these people got a little richer faster than these people. That's their complaint. But everybody's doing better.
And if you looked at the tax cuts, Steve Ford, so Steve Moore is saying they're bookended essentially by Reagan tax cuts and Trump tax cuts, okay? Middle-income people and lower middle-income people have benefited enormously. In fact, I know in Trump 1.0, we did these numbers with Kevin Hassett and so forth. People at the middle and the lower income people actually had the highest percentage gain of after-tax income.
And what that underscores is, as you say, about rising tide lifts all boats. Mm-hmm. And a couple of things on that. One is in terms of getting that point across to people. Liz has a good point about Walmart and Costco, but also he should index. I know he doesn't want to do it. Index capital gains, especially on healthcare costs, and on healthcare costs, push HR departments to have people have more 401k-like plans in their health care plans where they control the money, not the employer. And the average family cost, Larry, is about $28,000 a year, which is why take-home pay hasn't risen as much as it should. It's gone up. But if you gave people a choice of a catastrophic plan that they'd have to pay out of pocket $8,000, but could keep the other $20,000, you know what people would take. So as we get more free markets in healthcare, I think you're going to see an even more prosperous middle class and lower income people moving up the ladder, and their quality of life improves. There's not a big quality of life gap anymore between the middle class and the upper class and the lower classes. So that's a great tribute to free enterprise. Yes. Imagine.
Wonderful. Liz Peek, it's going to be a triumph in Iran, and the regime's going to be removed. I don't know who's going to replace it or what, but it's going to be better than the one now. All I'm saying is I just want that you get rid of the mullahs in this regime. Whoever takes over, it's going to be better. They have potentially a good economy. I'm thinking, when you put freedom back into the calculation, you're going to get a lot more prosperity. You're going to get a lot more investment. You're going to get a lot more trade. The whole premise of the Abraham Accords in Trump 1, which accompanied 5 or 6 countries with Israel, the whole premise was investment and trade. And the likelihood is once the Iranian regime is destroyed, you're going to see an expansion of the Abraham. Saudi Arabia is going to come. They're all going to come in. And you'll see the potential in the Middle East for phenomenal prosperity, Liz. That's just my vision here.
I think that's totally right, Larry, and I don't even think that's wildly optimistic. If you have a neutral Iran think of the money that has been going towards terrorism and basically defending against terror plots from Iran in all of those countries. And historically, a lot of people don't understand that the Arab countries didn't want to deal with each other, much less with Iran or with Israel. I mean, it has been an area of constant bickering and feuding. If you just get a neutral Iran, imagine the progress that could be made. By the way, nothing can go forward in Gaza while Hamas is still in control, funded by Iran. So that is another enormous opportunity. I mean, everybody would like to see the Palestinians have a Gaza homeland that is actually rebuilt and is okay to live in. But I mean, the opportunities are endless. Look, the Middle East is already booming in terms of Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia and Dubai because they have so many unbelievably good assets, including obviously energy. But that's where data centers are going. That's where commerce is. They have become Dubai is the banking center that Singapore was briefly. I don't know why they've lost so much ground to Dubai, but they have. So the potential is there without a doubt. And I think removing Iran as a constant threat to all those countries would be an unbelievably gigantic achievement.
Steve Moore, the Middle East will be overtaking Europe. Europe, at least Western Europe's going completely wrong direction. I don't, maybe a little bit in Italy, but I just don't see any big changes in Europe. Kind of lost them there.
Yeah, but Larry, you're right. Europe can't get out of its own way.
Europe is sclerotic. They're just.
But Europe's going to take its cues from Poland, which has been a great economic success story. So,
Poland's good.
So I think there's good things to come.
I got to jump.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
At Manhattan University, a graduate degree is not out of reach. You'll gain real-world skills, credentials employers value, and connections to New York City's top companies. Choose from their new Master of Science degrees in healthcare informatics, digital marketing and analytics, business analytics, or financial analytics, all built around hands-on learning and industry partnerships. Graduate ready to lead, not just work. Take the next step at manhattan.edu/graduate. Manhattan University. Lead the future.